One does not enter a state of freedom or attain nirvana. The unchanging vast expanse, samsara, and nirvana have never known existence. Here there is no frame of reference for renunciation or attainment, hope or fear, but rather a supremely spacious expanse that is the primordially enlightened ground of being. All things are mere labels, for in actuality they are beyond characterization or expression. Having decisively experienced that samsara is not confusion and nirvana is not freedom, let no one make any effort. Let no one try to meddle with or alter this. Awareness with no breadth or depth is not subject to restrictions or extremes. So give up any frame of reference. Awareness involving no plans or actions, no coming or going, entails no time frame or antidote. So drop reification and effort. If there is a deliberate frame of reference, it is a cause of bondage. Do not rely on any fixed construct whatsoever. Let go in evenness. Longchen Rabjan, the precious treasury of the basic space of phenomena. We continue. Now we can either have background noise or not background noise. I'm in a new recording environment. More on this in a moment. Here it is with the gate. So with the noise gate, it kind of kills the background noise. But I think it also squeaks and makes other noises that I don't want. So we're going to have the background noise so we don't have the squeaks, at least for now, until I figure something else out. Unfortunately, I do not have a dedicated studio. I do have the podcast on the fly. We've done it in a lot of ways. When I first started podcasting in 2005 for the Portland Jazz Jams podcast, live jazz, just one unit, stereo recorder. I think it was called the iRig. Anyways, these are in the days of early iPods, so having a stereo recorder out for bass, drums, guitar, vocals, saxophone, a room. So we would just record the room, and it worked. It was a really great podcast. Went on for about 5 years. Well, this is long before everybody had to have a podcast to be relevant. If you don't have a podcast and you're a celebrity, so this is back in the day when people would take their iPod. That's why it was called a podcast. Take their little tiny iPod that didn't even have a screen, and they'd be recording whatever activities they were doing. This is Darren Littlejohn. Welcome to the 12-Step Buddhist Podcast, episode 112, The Joy of Living. Don't miss the bliss. I'm going to cover a little section of reading from the two Khenpos, the two Venerable Khenpos. The link is up there on the podcast page, which is podcast.compassionaterecovery.us. And yeah, you may hear people talking on the phone. You may hear people walking by. This is the new environment. It is an improvement, and it is a fantastic up level to the previous environment. And I'll say more about that in a moment. Just on the text, it's a restricted text, so you can't buy it, and you shouldn't touch it if you haven't had transmission on it. That said, you can formulate the intention to have that transmission and take it from there. So you'll have to connect with qualified lineage holders. Now there is another book that the Keith Dowman version is going to be on there on the link as well. He says as much, he even says scarier things in the beginning of his book. So like you'll burn in hell if you read this. I don't know what he said. He said it, and yet he published it. So we have these disclaimers. That said, the section I'm going to focus on isn't very technical. It's quite brief. And it's really connected to, a lot of other principles in Buddhism, or shall we say a lot of principles in Buddhism that we use as part of our daily repertoire. Well, what we have from the two Khenpos are called the 5 powers. And if I have to think about this through a little bit, it's not quite exactly the same as another 5 qualities or characteristics, 5 qualifications from the Buddha. That's now that I look at it. So, but we do have devotion as the first one. So the 5 powers are devotion, joyful effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. But what I want to say about the nature of sacred texts, secret texts, the transmission of Dharma in different traditions and systems at different times with entirely expanded and enumerated, cataloged concentration by the Tibetans. They've spent like 300 years translating, organizing, and categorizing, and the goal was to get all the teachings. I don't know that they succeeded to get them all, but a lot of these are common in, say, common knowledge, or things that you may be aware of, or think, we think that we understand a term. I'm very guilty of this, thinking that I understand something, and then only realizing, I don't know, decades, I'd say years later, but it's really decades later. Some are, slow learners. Some of us are slow learners, I'll say. And I've learned about myself that I had a lot of arrogance and a lot of pride, and I really thought I knew something, and I didn't know shit. I remember a lot of instances. So I'm cautioning you to take a freshness attitude. So let's just cultivate a fresh attitude. Have a nice deep inhale. Fill it up like a nice balloon, yet relaxed in the throat. Exhale, let it go, don't push it out. Just linger in openness, complete relaxed openness. Savasana, if you're a yogi, again, don't think you know what Savasana is. You can't know what mindfulness is. If you go into meditate, that's why we have Zen mind, beginner's mind. This means that we're fresh in our attitude and our outlook. So try to have a new definition, not the definition that you already have in your mind, and take the Dharma as something that's teaching us something, right? Not telling us what we already know, because what value would it be then? So this really relates to the key of this topic today, in finding the joy of living and how to not miss the bliss. Because the bliss, bliss will say, is ever present, unchanging, crackling. It's never not available, because it's never not what we are. It's never not who we are. What you're looking for, you're looking with. So devotion is our first power. Quote, when we are practicing the Dharma, there are 5 powers that are always necessary. The first is the power of devotion. Without the power of devotion, we are not going to motivate ourselves to do good things, and we are not going to recognize our nature. Without devotion, we won't appreciate or respect our inheritance and our precious opportunity. Joyful effort. Once we have strong devotion, the second power is the power of joyful effort. Even if we respect, appreciate, and feel great joy and gratitude for our opportunities, we still have to activate them with joyful effort. Joyful effort means to continue to maintain, cherish, and honor our true nature. With joyful effort, we recognize Rigpa and our true nature as the embodiment of the 3 kayas, and maintain and apply this realization all the time in meditation and post-meditation, wherever we go, and in whatever we do. Mindfulness, and I'll just stop with the third. The third power is the power of mindfulness. If we have devotion and joyful effort, but somehow we forget the instructions or the teachings, it will delay our achievement. Mindfulness is always necessary and important. Mindfulness means not being distracted by mundane, unnecessary activities or engagements. Particularly in the beginning, when our practice is not yet stable, mindfulness is very important. Mindfulness means we are paying attention to our own self. We are being our own teacher by constantly reminding, re-strengthening, and restabilizing our motivation and practice. Sometimes we're distracted by many mundane worldly activities, and other times we are distracted by inner conflicting emotions, mental states, and thoughts. In order to be our own teacher, we must subdue these distractions by always keeping mindfulness with us. When we have mindfulness, alertness, and thoughtfulness, we'll overcome all of these distractions. We are helping guide ourselves, which is actually the best help. My Zen teacher Joko Beck would say, life just as it is, the only teacher. But let's not misinterpret that we don't need a teacher. We need a teacher to help us teach ourselves. We need that voice to bring us in. We need to adopt and connect and perform the practices which connect us with the mind state, with the enlightened state of the teacher. And this is one of the major differences in the different systems. This is not something that you find in your Theravada Buddhist tradition, although if you read a book called Esoteric Theravada, there's a lot more to the mystical side of the Theravada that many people would know. That's a highly scholarly, academic, and technical book. I'm just making the point that because, as I said, if you have typical conventional definitions, you have to let them go. The Dharma is not a commodity packageable by Google and delivered by TikTok. All right, so mindfulness is a very, very deep, multidimensional, infinitely layered practice. It's not the thing. It's a tool on the path, along with joyful effort. So the third power is the power of mindfulness. If we have devotion and joyful effort, but somehow we forget the instructions or the teachings, it will delay our achievement. Mindfulness is always necessary and important. Mindfulness means not being distracted by mundane, unnecessary activities or engagements. Particularly in the beginning, when our practice is not yet stable, mindfulness is very important. Mindfulness means we are paying attention to our own self. We are being our own teacher. I already read that part. Sometimes we're distracted by many mundane worldly activities. And other times we are distracted by... Okay, so as you can see, it's not a perfect recording environment. Yes, I actually do have to finish the show, so we're going to continue. So mindfulness means we're paying attention to our own self. We're being our own teacher. Sometimes we're distracted by many mundane worldly activities, such as people who want this to be a construction zone. All right. At other times, we are distracted by inner conflicting emotions, mental states, and thoughts. In order to be our own teacher, we must subdue these distractions by always keeping mindfulness with us. When we have mindfulness, alertness, and thoughtfulness, we'll overcome all of these distractions. We're helping guide ourselves, which is actually the best help. So having read that twice, it just bears repeating until it sinks in. If we think we know what mindfulness is, we are not in Zen mind, beginner's mind. We're not in the freshness of the moment. In fact, any conceptualization, according to the Dharma, and this, if you listen to some people who've sort of borrowed and stolen from the Dharma and try to repackage it into something saleable on a weekend workshop, I'm speaking a lot of like these integral types, and these like super affluent, very expensive, nerdy, intellectual kind of, let's just take what we think. You really dilute the meaning of everything when you put it all into a chart, So it might be fine for a conceptualization to get an understanding of the relationships between things, but you cannot package the Dharma. And that's really the problem with the intellectual approach. The intellect wants to solve the problem, solve the riddle, gain the power, be positive and overcome, and not be in the negative or the lack. And the lack is always into the intellect. The lack is the lack of understanding and the lack of knowledge. But what we're offered in the Dharma is a real knowledge, a true knowledge, a knowledge of our Buddha nature. And in these particular teachings, in these type of teachings, we're talking about this and how to get there, but it's really not fair to you to present this without letting you know that this is a whole path, and there's lots of ways to go. But it's not a willy-nilly, dilly-dally, dibble-dabble kind of nonsense. The Dharma is serious, and if we want it to work, we take it seriously. So we find a teacher with whom, to whom, in whom we are devoted. We have confidence in the teaching. And I would say that, yes, if you have a book of the Buddha, you can be somewhat confident, but it's much better if you have teachers and disciples and community around you that you participate in and with, just like you would if you were, say, for example, in the 12-step program, in the 12-step community. Social support is a major factor in any kind of recovery from any kind of illness. Now, I could try, if I could have power over people to stop them, I would. But here, if we put the noise gate on, maybe, I don't know, maybe it'll do something different. But literally, if I waited for it to be quiet, there would be no show. Unless I did this I guess I could do this at 6 a.m. I'll have to coordinate the time for your benefit and for your ability to understand and hear these things without so many obstructions and distractions. That said, I've done enough decades of meditation in noisy places that I used to, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I would have, it was always a violent reaction to anything that was noisy or woke me up. So many, many years of Zen and yoga and things like that, really enable us to have a little bit of a sense of ease even when things are to a point. So the aspect really that I wanted to discuss about this, of finding bliss, is the joyful effort aspect, right? So how do we find joyful effort, particularly if we have high ACE score? I know that many of you have read Compassionate Recovery or otherwise know about your ACE score. If you don't, please go take the quick test. I've got it on the website, podcast.compassionaterecovery.us. It's also in the book Compassionate Recovery. You can also Google it. There's an NPR 10-question version. But, when we look within and we feel it's dark, when we look within and we feel it's negative, we don't feel joy. We feel shame. We feel existential shame. We feel depression, low self-esteem, poor mental health, on and on. We feel the effects of our addictions before, during, and after. Maybe we feel illness and things like that. So we want the wellness. We want the wellness of being. Hey, you know what? Maybe a moment comes for us, and it will come for all of us. When we go into the hospital and we're not coming out. Or yesterday it was one thing, today it's not. And does that mean we're done with Dharma practice? Does that mean we have no chance? No, it means that we shouldn't squander the moments that we do have. And we should train diligently in joyful effort. How do I apply joyful effort? Well, have an inhale. Fill it up and exhale. And as you linger, notice the prickly, fresh, electric sensation on your skin. Notice the scent closest to you. The taste within your taste system, your seat, your bones. Notice the shadows, not looking at anything, not looking for something. Noticing as awareness. If we get really still, have an inhale. Let it go. Hang out in open space awareness, just noticing and noting the experience, just noticing the experience. Notice the thought as it arises, label it. Oh, thinking about chocolate cake. Oh, thinking about sex. Oh, thinking about resentment. Oh, thinking about fear. However, label it, let it go. Label it, let it go. It's like dropping a label on a leaf floating by in the stream that kind of stops at a little eddy and spins a little bit, and we get mesmerized by it, and we just label it, oh, that's just a leaf. That's not the face of the Buddha, that's just a leaf. Come back to our global awareness, have an inhale. Feel everything on the inhale and the exhale, fresh and free. So I made some moves, I made some changes. I now own my own place to live. There's no one living with me. For the past 6 or 8 months, I've been living under people for some reason or another. And there's a housing crisis, in America at least, for people like me. So I had to really come up with some ideas and some plans. I was at a high elevation, unable to breathe, and I was several times in a row led to believe that I was in a safe and okay place to be, even after explaining to the prospective newer people that I was going to be renting from that I had been through really traumatic experiences with people who had told me such promise and had turned on me like some kind of like I just went pee-pee in their cornflakes. And no explanation, no reason given. And then also reasons given that are psychotic and have nothing to do with reality and are a complete projection of insanity towards me when I'm not the subject or the cause of anyone's trauma or existential shame. Well, at least anyone in these particular situations where I don't even know the people, and they just turn out going negative. And I'm like standing there going, I just don't believe I'm watching this as if it's just a really stupid movie that keeps happening. And no one can answer it. No one can explain it. So I've never had these problems when not living with other people. So living with other people is off the table. However, it's easier said than done. I had to accumulate some cash and hustle and liquidate and move and drive and load up the animals and come to a new location in a new climate in a new part of the country. You know, I'm not in, let's just say I'm not in, it's a purple area, you know. Could be red, it could be blue, but it's not super conducive. But there isn't much I can do. This is what I can afford. And so I'm here, and I'm grateful to have this space. My animals can be comfortable. We own this. This is not up to someone else to make any decisions for us or about us. And, you know, I have to admit the suffering was acute, and I was really afraid for my own survival. I was afraid of being targeted, you know, by people that are paranoid and trying to make me the cause of their nightmare, which I've anywhere near caring at all about being involved in anyone else's BS. I just try to keep to myself and make my plan. So it all worked out where I wound up owning this situation as mine, title intact, and you know, yeah, I don't have transportation, but I am back into proximity of stores, food, restaurants, and picked up a job. And it will be a simple and mundane task. And being of service and keeping my mouth shut, my hands to myself, and taking care of that service aspect. And it was, you know, it's easy for me to sit and say, yeah, okay, feel the bliss, notice the bliss, don't miss the joy. The joy is in living. The joy of living is the joy of being alive. And the joy of being alive exists for me even in the most excruciating circumstances, although it's not so easy to get there. It's much better if we can train and train and train, but honestly, we can't really train for the moment of death when we pass into the bardo of the in-between. Plan for that and be ready for that unless we do a boot camp on it. And the boot camp is, you know, whatever we're going through, whatever our life brings up. We have an inhale, exhale, And yeah, when the toothache is banging away at your jaw, it's pretty tough. If you're waiting in the ER, it's pretty tough. But if it's our last moment of breath, it's also pretty tough. So we should train diligently. Diligence is one of the qualities and characteristics. Devotion. I am devoted to this path. I have to understand the path to be devoted to it. It's with joy because I understand that there is a path which leads to the cessation of suffering. I'll leave it at that. It's joyful if we're present to it and allow ourselves to experience it. I'm personally grateful to be out of that misery and suffering and enjoying the space of my own and being left alone and being independent and taking care of my Dharma, taking care of my animals, taking care of my studies, taking care of my books. So, prayer does work. It does change things, and it works if you work it. And I will say that as a Buddhist. So we'll pick it up again next week, next year, going into the 2024 season. New podcasts, new dwelling, new environment, new town, new opportunity to get back into yoga. Do some groups and do some stuff in the community. More on that as we go. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye-bye to 2023. To that, I say peace out and namaste.